Tervetuloa Wasa Innovation Centeriin ja WIC Science-keskustelun pariin. Tänään on erittäin kunnianarvoisa vieras, professori Pier Luigi Sacco Italiasta. Professor Sacco, it's great to have you here and it's a great privilege. Welcome to Wasa Innovation Center.
Thank you. I was very curious to see Wasa personally because I've heard some very interesting things about this city and this territory.
And the reason that you are here is, of course, to see the place as self and be familiar with the whole Wasa area and Kvarken region, is the idea of culture 3.0. Professor Sacco, it is not very simple thing for me to understand how should we and how to understand culture 3.0.
Yeah, I think that there is a simple way to put it. Culture has never had the same role in our society throughout history. There are different situations. For a very long time, especially in Europe, for us, culture has been very much about a kind of illumination. There were the experts that were deciding what was culture and what was not, and we had to adapt to this model, of course with lots of benefits, but also without the possibility in some sense to speak our mind. That's the patronage model, in which it is culture 1.0. It's a situation in which experts dictate the rules and the public decides whether they like or not, but in the end, even if they don't like, nothing really changes. Then, of course, we have culture 2.0, which is a culture and creative industry. That's 20th century culture. It's been invented in Europe, but basically developed in the United States. In this new model, still, you are the public. You can only appreciate or not really speak your mind. But now is the public who decides, and in particular, how many tickets you sell. Now we are in a different situation, which is culture 3.0. What is the difference? The difference is that now, for the first time, or better, returning to very ancient times, but in a very, very different context, we can participate in the creation of content. And by we, I really mean everybody. This is the novelty. And it's a situation in which, of course, the experts are important. Of course, the market is important. But the most important thing of all is how culture changes the behavior of people. And so today, we can think of collective creation and collective intelligence to tackle issues like environmental sustainability, social cohesion, innovation, health and well-being through culture. That's a sea change. And I think that we have still to learn how to do it, because of course we are very early in this transition, but it's the most exciting time to be interested in culture, because for the first time everybody has agency. So the point is how to make everybody confident, everybody willing to exploit this potential. And that's the challenge that we face today.
Now you have if I have understood correctly, you have maybe written or drawn the program for Culture 3.0 here in the Kvarken region. As you said, it is quite a challenge, but how would you describe what should be the main goal for Culture 3.0 in this region?
The main goal would be to create the first real experiment of collective intelligence driven by culture. What we are seeing today in terms of the digital economy is very much a re-edition of the old models of the 20th century. For example, we think of the social media. But what are the social media after all? They are basically machines to generate advertising revenue. What is the difference with television? Much less than we can think of. The real point is to explore the full-fledged potential of the digital. That has to do not with extracting value from people by selling them to advertisers, but has really to do with thinking together in a completely new way to generate new solutions. I think that, especially in a territory like this, that sits at the top of the European innovation rankings, we have the right conditions to experiment with this, which is not, let's say, imitating the Silicon Valley, but is pursuing a completely different model. Because Europe can really, in some sense, launch what I think is a socially sustainable approach to innovation, in which, again, there is not a small elite that decides everything, because in the end, that's the Silicon Valley model, a small elite that decides everything, but a truly democratic, truly inclusive, and transformational way to do innovation through culture. I am really hopeful that the Kvarken region can become the cradle of this radical alternative model of innovation.
You have also explained the idea of, or the vision to become this kind of laboratory for these new innovations and new cultural development as a whole. What benefits do you see from adopting the idea of Culture 3.0 in this area?
The best benefits, in my opinion, are the fact that we can approach problem solving in a different way. Think, for example, of issues like, especially now in the post-pandemic world. Think of issues like mental health and loneliness. This is becoming a serious problem all over the world. I think that we are understanding now how culture makes us more socially connected in ways that are very fulfilling from the psychological point of view. This has to do a lot with things like inventing new rituals. So it's very much about how we stick together, in which ways we recognize each other, in which way we feel as part of one community in a real way. Well, culture can do extraordinary things from this point of view. And it's not that somebody designs it. Of course, you very correctly said, I have made a proposal. But this proposal now has to be embraced and changed and evolved through the collective intelligence of this community. Because no single individual, however expert, however ingenious, can devise a solution that is good for everybody. It's very much about exploiting the best of our potential together to do these things.
I can't help to ask how this idea of Culture 3.0, there has to be a starting point. Somehow it has to be implemented.
Yes.
So once it's implemented, maybe there would be a best case scenario, something. Where do you see this going?
Well, it's an interesting moment in which this idea is actually developing in many different latitudes in this moment. So I'm working with the United States, I'm working with the Far East, I'm working with Europe, starting to work with Africa. So it's interesting that it's really flourishing everywhere. But the really interesting thing is that I think that in every place, it takes a different nuance because it really depends on the local resources and of course, collective intelligence is not the same everywhere. So what I see at the moment is a strong scaling up of the interest. At the same time, I try to make it very gradual. I don't want it to grow too fast. Because if you grow too fast before you really understand what's going on and you really have actionable solutions, it's like a bubble that will burst. What I'm interested in is to, let's say, to serve the collective interest of the local communities. It must be good for them. So it's better to do less, but in a more responsible and effective way than to do a lot, but in ways that don't really change things. So I expect that this will scale up further, but what I'm really looking forward now are the concrete results of experiments like the one that we are starting here.
What does Culture 3.0 would mean to different actors? Because everybody has to be involved.
Sure.
So we have industries,
Sure.
we have municipalities, cities, we have organizations, societies, and
Sure.
then of course individuals.
Sure.
What does it mean?
Well, it means different things for different people, clearly. I think that the most important perspective to start from is really the perspective of the people of the civil society, and is really, you are authors. You can contribute to the creation of collective ideas, collective content. This is something that we are not very good at doing yet, because we have the illusion that social media enabled us to do this, but it's not completely true. So it's first of all discovering this new freedom to participate in the development of new ideas, new proposals that change our own way of living. At the same time, this means, for example, for public administration, finding a public opinion that is not simply making requests, do this, do that, but is making proposal. Let's do this, let's do that. And that changes completely, because it's not just that you have passively, witnessing, let's say, a public opinion that gives you grades in terms of future elections, for example, or you're simply optimizing the consensus strategy. But it's really having the possibility to collaborate in a totally new way, for example, in creating social value. For companies, this means that, again, you don't have simply clients. You have more and more people who can really co-create with you, and this is becoming, of course, pretty standard in some sense in the organizational literature, but this co-creation rhetoric so far has been mostly rhetorics, because in the end, what you want to do is to sell a product and to create commitment. Collective intelligence really means that we have peer learning, and peer learning means that the best ideas can be really developed in a new space in which companies, civil society, administrations really work together in the common interest. This is not naive. That's the point. To approach the real kind of societal challenges that we face today, that's the only possible way. If we don't do it this way, we are going to fail. And we see the results, for example, in terms of global climate change, to make an example. So I think that there is a very concrete path, but it's crucial to have actionable and viable examples. So here in Kvarken, we have a big responsibility. If we make it work in a certain way, I am very confident that we can, this could really become a role model for so many different territories that maybe start from less favorable conditions, but still can be inspired. But what can be concretely achieved in conditions like this?
I have to also bring this up because in the Nordic countries especially, where we have a good level of innovation, everything is so good that you might feel that there is no need to develop. Do you see this as a potential problem?
It's a big problem, because in some sense the problems begin when you start thinking that you have everything already. And innovation, you cannot really stay in the same point. Innovation is a race. So if you stop, in some sense, you're slipping down. And this really means that it's simply not more of the same, but it's also thinking what is changing to stay innovative, for example, in a future scenario. We are in a situation in which so many huge problems are becoming, let's say, so threatening, so overcoming, that clearly we cannot tackle them through the classical solutions, and clearly we cannot simply rely on the advice of a bunch of experts, because every single expert was not able to forecast and to find solutions for the kind of problems that we face now. So it's very much about these new forms of collective intelligence as the next evolutionary challenge for the humankind. And to do this properly, we have to change the notion of innovation. So one could say, okay, so let's do it where, let's say, there is a bitter need of innovation, not in such accomplished places like Nordic countries. I don't agree with this position, because to make this leap forward, it's indispensable to start from a situation in which certain goals in terms of innovation outcomes have already been reached. So there is a maturity that allows to go for the next step. So in some sense, I think that especially in Europe, of all places, probably the Nordic countries are the best possible place to start from. And in particular, the Kvarken region that in this moment is also striving for reaching this new level of integration. It's probably one of the best possible environment, because there is a clear demand of new solutions, and so we are in the right context also for people to understand what is the value of this new leap forward that in other situations could be more difficult to explain.
Thank you very much, Professor Sacco. Last thing, I'm sure that many people who are now watching this interview and listen to your words, they are excited. How to be involved, how to be a part of this? What is your message to these people?
Yeah, the message is that we are really preparing to get you involved, and we are really looking forward not only to giving you some proposals, but also listening to your ideas. And this is something that we can really do together, playing together, and playing in a double sense, having fun together and working like an orchestra. Because the real sound of this new way of collective intelligence really comes not from the single instruments, but really from the chorus that we can create playing all together.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.